All right, so we are recording today. So welcome everybody. I know this is a unique way of doing this training, but I'm not able to make it out to Fallon on Friday night due to some other conflicts, and so I wanted to make sure that we got this put together. So thank you everybody for joining me on this lovely Monday evening. So just to introduce myself, I know Stanton, but the rest of you I will meet on Saturday. But I am Carrie Stark, and I'm the State 4-H Director here in Nevada. And then also, because I'm pretty much it, I'm also the State Shooting Sports Coordinator. But I will let you know, I have actually been I've been working in 4-H for about 25 years, but I've been working in shooting sports since about 2007. So it's been a number of years. You know, I'm very familiar with the program, and actually we're going to be using some new curriculum tonight that has been developed in the last year or so. We're pilot testing it in the West, and I was one of them that helped create this new curriculum for the youth development component. And who is on the 702 number, just so I can keep track of who's here tonight?
Elizabeth McGowan.
Okay, great. Thank you. I thought that might be you since you're the only Clark person we have. So,
yeah.
All right, and it looks like I have the Breens. Are all three of you there?
Did you guys get her water? Did you not give Molly water?
I did.
Her water is empty.
All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody if you don't have mute on your phone or on your system. And then when you want to talk, you just, if you're on your computer, you just hit the mute button on the bottom and that will open up your microphone. Otherwise, if you want to type in the chat box, I know Elizabeth, being on the phone, you can unmute and just ask a question. Stanton, for now, that's how you can, if you want to do that. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is share my screen with everybody so you can see the PowerPoint that I will be using. So and then everybody on Saturday, you will be getting not only copies of the PowerPoint, but you'll also be getting what we're calling a primer. And that is a book that will go through this information for you. So it'll be in with your, with the book from the discipline. So this is the first of our series there are 4 modules with this training. So this one is the first of the series. It's going to take us probably about 15-20 minutes to go through this module. And but just to kind of start, we're going to talk about what is 4-H. Now, I know a lot of you are 4-H volunteers and have been for a number of years, but this has got some information about the program. So module 1, we're going to talk about what is 4-H, the organizational structure and the history of 4-H, 4-H program fundamentals, the mission mandates of 4-H, and then the roles and the accountability. So what is 4-H? We are America's largest youth development organization where we empower over 6 million youth 6 million young people nationwide each year with the knowledge and skills to lead for a lifetime. In Nevada, we have approximately 67,000 youth that are involved in the 4-H program across our state. We believe in the power of youth, and 4-H recognizes those valuable strengths and the real influences that every child can possess and influence to improve the world around us. We provide hands-on learning experiences in a wide array of project areas such as health, science, agriculture, and citizenship, and as most of you know, in shooting sports. To foster this learning, we focus on providing safe and supportive environments for our young people where our youth receive guidance from caring adult mentors. I always say my job is to provide both a physically and an emotionally safe environment for all young people involved in the program. And that truly is one of our guiding principles. We also, to ensure that youth safety, each one of our volunteers, adult volunteers, goes through an application and a background screening process. Many of you know, and sorry, I had to put on my glasses because I can't quite see everything, but you know, most of you know that we do have a pretty extensive application and volunteer screening process here in Nevada. You need to go through fingerprinting and then go through child protection training. And that has changed in this last year, and actually we are now requiring, the university is requiring that all volunteers go through the screening process every 6 years, and that they go through the child protection training every year. So if you haven't heard that from your county 4-H staff person, then you will be hearing it shortly. And we also provide, we encourage all of our young people to take on and engage in various leadership roles. You know, whether our program is located in the inner cities of Las Vegas, in the suburbs, in small towns or farms, or even our most remote reaches in the nation and in Nevada, because we have some of the most remote areas in our state, we really strive to provide 4-H accessibility to all youth in a variety of ways. The reach and the depth of 4-H is unmatched by any other organization. We come from all corners of America and again, assist over 6 million youths annually in pursuing their goals. And it takes an amazing amount of adults to do that. There are more than 3,500, sorry, okay, my mouse. There are more than 3,500 4-H professionals around the country. That includes our county 4-H staff, as well as our extension educators and state level staff and national level staff. And there are over 500,000 volunteers across our country. So why is it important? Really, 4-H members, you know, if you're not familiar, probably about 4 years ago now was the conclusion of about a 10-year study around 4-H and what is it that makes 4-H different and unique from other youth serving organizations. And so what they found in that study is that 4-H members are 4 times more likely to engage in contribution, and that really is the big key that they found, that what makes 4-H different is that contribution. They're 1.9 times more likely to pursue STEM-based courses in high school. They are 1.8 times more likely to go to college. They're 1.6 times more likely to report better grades. So academically, they tend to be higher. And they're significantly less likely to do drugs, alcohol, or to use drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, or to engage in delinquent behaviors. So that really, you know, shows what our contribution is to the program. And that study was done in about 42 different states over, like I said, over a course of 10 years. And then also our adult role models and mentors. You know, as an adult volunteer, you're scheduling regular meetings, you're being organized, you're developing those clear communications strategies, and really empowering the youth within the club to take leadership responsibilities. Those are ways that you serve as role models. And so what the information that I'm going to be sharing in these modules is a way to help you become a well-informed and a successful shooting sports instructor. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly, we're going to move into the structure of 4-H. And I don't know if many of you are familiar with this, but essentially 4-H and other extension programs, cooperative extension programs, are the result of a really unique 3-way partnerships between the federal, the state, and the county or local levels. So we're going to take a really simplified look at a pretty complex organization. So here we've got the federal level. This is our federal oversight for the 4-H program comes from NIFA, or the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, which is a division of USDA, or the United States Department of Agriculture. And these priorities from the federal level are then channeled down to the land-grant university system at our respective state institution. So in this case, within the state land-grant universities, so in Nevada right now, the state land-grant university is University of Nevada, Reno. And within that state land-grant university, the responsibility of 4-H is routed through the cooperative extension director and then to the respective state 4-H program administrator. So in our case, we have a fairly new, he's been on board 1 year, extension director, Dr. Ivory Lyles, and then myself as a state 4-H program administrator. And this position, really the state 4-H program director, provides oversight and establishes the basic parameters for which all 4-H programs within the state are run. And then from there, we move on to the county, to the local level. And so really, we know that this is the most effective way to reach our youth. And so I delegate, from my level, I delegate the local 4-H program management responsibilities to our county extension 4-H personnel. So those are our paid staff. And those individuals then work with our authorized volunteers and other appropriate resources to deliver those high quality educational youth programs. So you can see, you know, it really is, but the volunteers and the youth component are really where the work happens. So I'm going to share a quick video with you, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this.
It began with the seed of an idea. In 1902, the heartland needed folks to embrace new advances in agriculture. But leaders with open minds, strong hearts, and willing hands weren't in abundance. Luckily, kids were. By empowering the next generation to lead, 4-H took root and grew and grew and grew. Grew kids who are confident and strong, who are curious enough to question, and capable enough to find the answer. To stick to a job until the job gets done. To know how to work with others and how to lead. 4-H is kept right on growing. Out of the farms and into the towns, from the suburbs to the cities. Anywhere curiosity roams and confidence thrives. Anywhere technology can be advanced and achievement is valued. Anywhere positive change is possible and giving back moves entire communities forward. When you think about it, it makes sense that we began with farming. After all, true leaders aren't born. They're grown.
All right. Oh, we have to finish it. Okay. So I love that video. I think it has done it just shows really the heart of what our program is. So just briefly about the history of 4-H, if you weren't aware, it started in the late 1800s. Universities realized that they were more likely to gain acceptance of new technology by first introducing these concepts to our youth on a small scale basis. So thus in 1902, Graham, who is started the first youth program in Clark County, Ohio. And this is really considered to be the precursor to the birth of 4-H in the United States. These early clubs focused on corn production and the growing and processing of tomatoes. So realistically, what started the whole 4-H movement was to teach our young people how to increase their corn production, and then they went home and taught their parents, and then also how to can tomatoes safely, and then the young people went home and taught their parents. So does somebody have a question? Okay. And then the formal launch of 4-H and extension was the passage of the Smith-Lever Act in 1946. 2014. And this is really what created the Cooperative Extension Service within USDA, which is what nationalized 4-H. Before that, lots of states had 4-H programs. In Nevada, we actually did not have an official 4-H program until 19. And so, we really started, over the years, Extension has expanded to more than 100 land-grant universities and over 3,000 county offices statewide, which is really combining those federal, state, and local expertise and the resources to meet those needs. Now, one of the things, when we first started, it had that agriculture and home economics focus. And as you know, as I said, more than 100 land-grant universities. And if you're familiar with the land-grant university system, then you may know that each state has a land-grant university, but there are actually additional land-grant universities across the country. There are what we call 1890 land-grant universities, and those were created in 1890 as the Morrill Act of 1890 in historically Black colleges, and then also in 1994 they granted land-grant status to many of the tribal colleges across the country. So today, as our country evolved, so did the 4-H program, as many of you have seen over the years. It is through our land-grant universities, 4-Hers are really tackling some of the nation's top issues, from global food security, climate change, and sustainable energy to childhood obesity and food safety. And as we really continue to dispel the myth that 4-H is just about cows and cooking, today's members are engaged, in that wide variety of STEM activities that include rocketry, robotics, environmental protection, and computer science. And this really is what's helping improve our nation's ability to compete for those key scientific fields and take on more effective challenges of the 21st century. So what are the 4-H's? Most of you probably do know, but they stand for head, heart, hands, and health. And they really represent a fourfold training and development model that 4-Hers receive in their program. The head, heart, and hands are familiar phrases for public speakers. In the early 1900s, with these three words, educators expressed the liberalizing of conventional education, the 3 R's to include practical arts, or the 3 H's. The 3 H's were then adopted by program organizers to reflect the educational theme of 4-H. Later, the 4th H of health was added. So let's just talk briefly about those 4-H's and what they stand for. So head, together the 4-H's symbolize the development of the head to think, plan, and reason with, which leads to a lifelong learning and success. The heart demonstrates a caring, responsible, and positive behaviors towards others. It results in contributions through civic engagement. The hands are to be useful, helpful, and skillful, enhancing long-term employability and economic stability. And finally, health is really to remind us to practice healthy living and productive use of leisure time, leading to happiness and overall well-being. So when we look at the 4-H pledge is, remember that youth want to be part of a group, which is a place where they belong. Make it, we want to make sure that our meetings have a 4-H focus, where the members know that they are safe and they're accepted. I was just on we were conducting some interviews today for one of our county positions, and the woman that interviewed was really interesting. She said, as a young person, she did not feel comfortable. She did not make friends easily. She just really struggled. But when she came to 4-H, she felt like she belonged. And that is, and so ever since then, she knew that was something that she wanted to do for a career. And so she is really, she was looking at, as 4-H as a career, which I think is fantastic and really exciting. So we start with, you should always start your meetings with the 4-H pledge. And and really get ways for young people to think about it. One example and one way to convey this sense of unity, think about it. These young people, and tell your kids, you're one of 6 million youth across the country that say this pledge at the beginning of your meetings. And so what a great way. And what you could do is, maybe especially with your new youth, is think about, once you complete the pledge, select a specific line and ask them what that phrase means to them. I know I have done that in some different speaking contests, and it really is pretty powerful when our youth give us those answers. So I've got one more video for you.
I pledge my head to clear thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living. For my club, my community, my country, and my world.
All right. And if anybody wants a copy of that video, you can just let me know on Saturday and I can save it and get you a copy of it. It's always good to show, maybe at club meetings. But I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the use of the 4-H name and emblem. And this is something we're starting to do more and more. I don't know if many of you realize that 4-H is only one of 5 federal marks which carry criminal penalties for misuse, and thus it holds protections and standards that far exceed those of common trademarks and copyrights. So when you think about it, that is, you can, and I'm going to talk about, what those are. And now granted, things happen, but I just, want you to be aware. But you can see those other 4, or the other 4. Now I did learn, I had always been told it was 3, and just in the last year I learned it was 5. So those 4 are the United States, the Presidential Seal of the United States, the Olympic Rings, American Red Cross, and Smokey Bear. The National 4-H Shooting Sports is not one of the federally protected, but because it has the clover, it is. So it requires formal authorization to use. And so what that is the proper authorization either can be from the county, state, or federal levels, depending on the intended use. So just to quickly let you know how that works, if you are making t-shirts for your clubs, then you really should send the design to your county 4-H professional personnel and have them approve that. Because technically the company that's making the shirts needs to have permission to use the 4-H name and emblem. And that's simple. That can be done at the county level. If it is something that's going to cross state lines, then that needs to come to the state level for permission. So an example would be, and I'll give an example of early in my career. When I lived in Michigan, there was a candy company in a county that was about 4 counties over, really, really good chocolate. And the county 4-H program decided, hey, let's make chocolate candy bars and have the 4-H clover on them and sell them as fundraisers. Well, because they wanted to really look at it statewide, they wanted to sell those statewide, they got permission from the state in order to make those candy bars, because they were going to be selling them across state line or across county lines. Now, when I left Michigan and moved to another state, I called and said, hey, can I buy some of those candy bars for my, I want to give them away for gifts. And I could not, because they did not have federal permission. I also just ran into there's a silversmith here in Nevada that makes beautiful belt buckles. The ones that we gave away at the state shooting sports tournament, or state shooting sports match this year for the High Point Awards. And I did, I went in and I met with them, and they had no idea that they had to have permission. And because they sell across state lines, they sell to multiple states and actually sell into Canada as well, using the 4-H Clover, they did not realize that they had to have federal permission. And, instead of turning them in or whatever, I just got them the paperwork, and they're in their process of getting that permission. And I don't see it being an issue. What we can't do is use the Clover for personal gain. So companies should not be using, you should not be using the Clover for, if you're to endorse a product. So it's also, there are strict specifications related to the design and the color of the Clover. And, this is where there is actually a booklet on the USDA website, and most of the counties have copies of, it's a user's guide for non-extension entities. And so it's really important that you become familiar with that if you're going to be using that. It's always, again, important to consult with the local 4-H personnel before you actually have something printed up. And then finally, there are criminal penalties for misuse. So if you ever notice on the Clover, and I don't know if you can see it, if you look at the Clover, on the one down in the National 4-H Shooting Sports, you can't even read the lettering, but if you ever notice it, it says 18 USC 707. What that stands for is US Code 18 Section 707. That is our federal protection. And what that states is people engaging in the unauthorized or inappropriate use of the 4-H name and emblem are subject to criminal penalties, including fines or imprisonment up to 6 months. So it's anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 fine, and then in prison, and then you can go to prison for up to 6 months for misusing. Now that's intentional use. Now I have, over the 25 years of my extension career, I have had one person or one organization turned into USDA for misuse of the Clover. And what that was it was a rival meat packing plants in a county. One had ads on TV that talked about, they supported 4-H and FFA, and come by, and they use the Clover and they use the name, come by meat at our facility. And the other meatpacking plant turned them into USDA. Now, what we did in that case is they called me, and I, sent a letter, and I actually had seen the ads, and because it was a county that was bordering another state, those ads actually went across state lines. So that was part of the reason that they went that far. And I'll tell you, probably a couple of months ago, I did run into a t-shirt company that I felt was inappropriately using the 4-H name and emblem, and they were doing it for their own personal gain. There was nothing, there was no agreements, no giving money back to the 4-H program, etc. And so I actually did turn them into USDA. Very rarely is that going to happen, though. And I've also been sitting in I was sitting in a training for new 4-H faculty, new 4-H staff. This was another state, and I was talking about the use of the name and emblem, because this tends to be, I tend to be called the Clover Cop. Even before I got into this role, I was called the Clover Cop, and everybody would send me their stuff to review beforehand. But, and I'm going along, and I was talking about, you can't use different colors, like the Clover can't be green, or it can't be orange, and it can't be blue, and it can't be marbled, and etc. And then somebody said, "You mean like your shirt?" And I looked down. It happened to be at the same time as our team conference that we were having at the time. And we had turquoise t-shirts printed and navy blue t-shirts printed. And we did the opposite color. So on the navy blue t-shirts, it had turquoise writing. And on the turquoise shirts, it had navy blue writing. On the sleeve was a bright turquoise clover. not good. But again, it was just one of those things that slipped right past us. We didn't even think about it. So no, we aren't going to get turned in, and no, you're not going to get in trouble for that. You're going to be asked to fix it, but, you know, not print any more of those. But again, you know, things happen. And then, you know, like I said, it's always best to check with the local 4-H personnel to secure authorization and make sure that you're using it correctly. And, you know, I get, if they don't know the answer, they will send it on to me and I will find out an answer. There's been a couple of them, I'll tell you, from here, since I've been in Nevada, that I didn't know if it was really the proper use or not. It was kind of a borderline. So I would send it on to USDA and say, hey, you know, is this correct? So, you know, we can always get you an answer. So 4-H has 3 mission mandates that we really work under. And those 3 are science, with that emphasis on STEM and really empowering our youth for the future. It is healthy living, which, you know, looking at targeting those health crises. We know that, we are in the 21st century, we have a national health crisis. And so we want to make sure that our young people understand proper nutrition and lifestyles. And then also citizenship, really looking at the greater community awareness and engaging our young people into the service to others. Probably the one thing that I love about shooting sports more than anything is I feel like shooting sports hits all 3 of these mission mandates. You know, in STEM, we really try to talk about the science behind the actual shooting and the ballistics and those types of things. You know, it's very much a healthy living activity. You know, they're getting out into the outdoors. There, you know, if you hunt, then you're probably hiking a little bit. Even if you're just shooting, if you're shooting a bow, that takes a lot of strength and a lot of ability. And then citizenship, you know, they're really learning to be good stewards of the community around them. So our roles and accountability, it's really to foster success. It's essential that our individuals have a working knowledge of the various roles within the organization and how each person effectively contributes to achieving those program goals. So I'm going to be going through just a quick slideshow that shows you kind of that structure. So most people are really not a fan of the top-down organizational charts, but, you know, the classic pyramid of organizational charts. So really with this program, we're talking about working with people. So let's think about how this could be thought about differently. So maybe we're much like a living organism or, you know, a tree. So on the first slide, this organism, this is what we're calling the 4-H Youth Development Program. So the whole slide, and it's represented by the trunk of a tree. So everything, even the 4-H Shooting Sports Program, has to pass through the trunk or there would be no uniformity or consistency in the program from county to county. So the trunk of the tree is the state 4-H office. From there, you've got the major branches of the tree, and these represent the many county offices throughout the state. And I know these aren't Nevada counties, but because this is going to be used nationwide. So these are our county offices. And then we have minor branches that represent the different 4-H clubs that make up our shooting sports or make up our county 4-H program. The leaves on the tree represent the volunteers that it takes to implement and make the 4-H program possible. In a tree where the sun's energy is captured and turned into usable energy. Where does that happen? Typically in the leaves. So the tree cannot survive without these energy factories. So likewise, the 4-H program cannot survive without the 4-H volunteer. That's where the energy comes from that runs the program that is created. Now, even though the tree cannot survive without the leaves, it can survive just fine without a handful of leaves. You can see we do have leaves that leave And, you know, in fact, regular pruning is a good management technique for both the leaves and for people-related organizations. So when 4 leaves hit the ground, you can see, look what happens. They're quickly replaced by new leaves. So when someone thinks that they're irreplaceable within our program, that's usually an indication that it's time to maybe look at replacing them. So, you know, this representation of 4-H volunteers as leaves is really an important principle for everybody to grasp. In most states, 4-H volunteers serve at the request of the cooperative extension program in their state. And we can request, that request can be withdrawn at any time and for no reason. But, you know, really the bottom line is if a volunteer chooses not to work within the direction and the leadership of the county extension educator, or if the program, or if the volunteer doesn't play well in the sandbox with others, we may ask that volunteer to, or we may replace that volunteer. I just think it's important that we understand that, especially that is critical within the 4-H shooting sports program, because this is our highest risk program within our organization. We are very, very diligent about that. And so I like to make sure that people understand and are very clear about that. So what do we think, what part of the tree represents the 4-H members? The fruit on the tree represents the 4-H members. So, you know, that's what we need to be concerned about. And when we think about trees, what is the end goal of any tree? It's to get fruit from. And so we need to, you know, that's what we need to be concerned about. The 4-H leaders, the parents, and our extension personnel need to focus on that fruit. So what do the roots represent in this organizational chart? The roots represent the funding sources for the 4-H program. There are both federal, state, and county tax dollars, as well as fees, grants, gifts, and contracts that are essential to the growth of this tree. Also, Also, there are state and county 4-H foundations or 4-H development groups, people that fundraise for us, that are an important part of funding at the state and county level programs. The support that's given to the program by the 4-H Shooting Sports National Committee is also represented by the roots. And just to let you know, this is one of the only programs nationally that actually has an oversight committee for it. And so we do have a National 4-H Shooting Sports Committee that does give us quite a few guidelines that we have to follow. And as anyone who has had training in plant science knows, the top growth of the plant is directly proportionate to the root growth. So the more funding that's directed to the 4-H shooting sports program, the more fruit that can be produced. And, you know, really this organizational chart can be used to describe any 4-H county or local program. Sorry. And it, you know, it's one of those, I think it, you know, for a common program or it gives us a good indication. So does anybody have any questions about this module? We're about ready to move into module 2. If you do, you can either type them in the chat box, if you see the chat box, or you can unmute your mic and you can ask those questions. I'm hoping there's not too many about this topic. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. And I am going to get my other PowerPoint ready. Okay, so now we're going to move into Module 2, which is an introduction to 4-H shooting sports. And some of you may be familiar with some of this, and others may not. Okay. So with this is the second of the modules. we're going to talk about in this one about what are the 4-H shooting sports goals and objectives. What is 4-H shooting sports? The national structure and guidance. The 4-H program and workshop fundamentals, because I think that's really important. And then what makes 4-H shooting sports unique? So the goal, the 4-H shooting sports provides a high quality program that's necessary for positive youth development by engaging our young people, our youth, in a safe, responsible use of firearms and archery equipment in a variety of settings through a comprehensive education, lifelong recreation, and healthy competition. Okay, that is pretty academic sounding. So what does that mean? So what is positive youth development? Well, you're going to learn more about positive youth development in some of the modules that are coming up. It really means that this approach provides young people constructive relationships in program settings that engage them to help them be successful in their growth and transition. So, into adulthood, sorry. As we continue through these modules and the workshop discipline trainings, you're going to hear a reoccurring theme. The ultimate focus of 4-H is on positive development of each and every child. It's essential that this focus is carried on throughout all of our 4-H meetings, our practices, and our other events that occur. Doing periodic assessments of club and local activities is really a good way to ensure things are measuring up to the 4-H standards. It's a good way, you could ask your 4-H young people, every few months, just stop and say, so, are you having fun? What are things that you wanted that we maybe could do differently? So we look at the National 4-H Shooting Sports objectives, and just as a map or GPS guides travelers along their way, there are 10 objectives that help chart the course for all shooting sports programs. The first one is to find and explore passions. I think all of you know that young people come to 4-H because of the shooting sports program. It is one of our in Nevada, it's one of our single largest programs, and it is our fastest growing program. I would say I probably, at the state level, I get at least 1 to 2 phone calls per week asking for information about how they sign their child, from a parent asking how they sign their child up for 4-H. What I do then is turn around and send it to the county. But it is that is their spark. That's what gets them into the program. And, from there, we just go on. So it engages, they're engaged in an effective 4-H program setting. So youth are empowered to have, for their own engagement. We hope that they're helping make decisions about what the club is doing and those types of things. And they're developing positive relationships with adults, youth, and peers. They're also empowered to develop those relationships. Frequently, our 4-H shooting sports instructors become really important role models and help to our youth to develop and reach their full potential. They explore a vast array of 4-H educational, recreation, and competitive activities. Just as proper nutrition requires a balance of items within the various food groups to maintain that physical health, the 4-H program needs to combine a variety of programs that are educational, recreation, and competitive to fuel the overall personal growth of the members. So when you think about that, you should be having educational activities. Maybe they're not practicing every night. Maybe you have somebody from Department of Wildlife that comes in and talks to your club about some topic that might be of interest to that group. And then also having recreational activities, even if it's just a fun shoot for them, that's not competitive. But then also, you need to balance that out with the competitive piece. And they need to thrive in multiple settings. By applying these skills and knowledge that they've gained, they're better equipped to thrive and excel in different settings. To enhance developmental and long-term outcomes. You know, while we want the members to celebrate various successes that they achieve over time, our ultimate goal with this is really to enhance the developmental and the long-term outcomes that each child will gain. That's also going to serve them well as they mature and grow throughout their lives. Number 7 is practice safe and responsible use of firearms and archery equipment, enhancing the existing shooting, conservation, and hunter education programs. You know, it seems like on a very regular basis, I get a lot of questions about why is 4-H involved in shooting sports. I don't have to tell you, any of you, that, you know, why we are involved, but you know, I have the standard answer of, you know, we're teaching our young people about the safe and responsible use of firearms and their archery equipment that's going to significantly reduce the potential for accidents. You know, safety is our number one priority. And we also, you know, that is our key. We are teaching the young people to respect that equipment, and that they will, you know, they're going to understand what the use is. It's also, our educational programs often serve to enhance the other existing shooting, conservation, and hunter education outreach efforts of other organizations. It's to explore the National 4-H mission mandates. You know, besides gaining discipline-specific expertise, each youth is encouraged to be actively engaged in one or more of our mission mandates. So the health, the science, and the healthy living, the science, and the citizenship. You know, whether it's our national need for more scientists, developing positive habits to overcome a wide array of health-related issues, or fostering an attitude to serve our communities. You know, our 4-H members acquire essential skills for that positive and productive future. And then we model safety, sportsmanship, and ethical behavior. You know, it's the old adage of actions speak louder than words, and thus it's vital that for both youth and adults that participate, we always demonstrate appropriate safety practices to ensure that the behaviors reflect a desirable sportsmanship trait and maintain 4-H's high standards of ethical behavior. So that's why, you know, as an adult, even though you need to be wearing safety glasses, you need to be wearing hearing protection, you need to be wearing closed-toed shoes, all of the things that we ask the young people to do, you need to be doing as well. And finally, to strengthen knowledge and life skills. So when our instructors are well prepared for meetings or the activities, and that they actively engage our youth in meaningful roles, those members are excited to learn and that they acquire those essential life skills. So the bottom line of that really is that the 4-H shooting sports program is dedicated to promoting safety, positive growth within youth, and building strong families. Because we know that our families, you know, I don't think I've ever been to a shooting sports program that there weren't at least, you know, we typically require a parent to be there, but we also have a lot of people that, you know, our parents want to be there with the kids. Hi, Rick. So what is 4-H shooting sports? So 4-H shooting sports officially started nationally in 1980. It was founded by the Texas State 4-H director, Tom Davidson. And it is, like I said, it's among the largest and fastest growing 4-H project in the United States. It reaches approximately 500,000 youth per year, about 500,000 youth per year. They're engaged in those hands-on learning experiences. Now, just so everybody knows, and I'll talk about this in a little while, but 4-H Clover Bud members, those young people that are 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 in Nevada, are not eligible to participate in 4-H shooting sports due to safety concerns and our insurance regulations. So you really need to check. You know, for the most part, we don't have any other age restrictions. There are guidelines. You know, some states have put a age limit of 12 on shotgun. We do not have that at this time. but just so, but if you do happen to move to another state and become a 4-H shooting sports instructor, be aware that you need to ask those questions. And of that, I learned today, of that 500,000 youth, about half of those are involved in the club program, and the other half are involved in in other delivery modes. So they might be reached at overnight summer camps. They might be reached at day camps. They may be, at the fair. They may be, a variety of ways. So also helping guide those 500,000 youth are 20,000 authorized volunteer instructors. And they're certified in their respective discipline, and they serve the 4-H shooting sports program at the local level. There are, as most of you are familiar, we require 12 to 15 years of required training, or 12 to 15 hours, of required training for each of the disciplines that are taught. And this is the only program we have in 4-H nationally that requires this additional training element. And there's reason for it, and there's also reason why we have not had very many accidents. The program is administered by the state 4-H program director at the respective land-grant university. Most of the time, the state 4-H program, especially with shooting sports, the state 4-H program director, that is what happens in Nevada. I'm hoping that things go the way we want in the legislative session that's coming up, and we will receive funding. We're asking for some additional dollars, and one of the things that we want to do with that additional dollar is to hire a full-time permanent 4-H outdoor education specialist / shooting sports coordinator at the state level. So if that happens, then there will be somebody dedicated just to shooting sports. And so, and then at the county level, then that program is managed through the 4-H county personnel. And just as a reminder, while 4-H strives to be inclusive to all, it's the opportunity to participate is a privilege, not a right. And so we need to remember that as volunteers. If you do have a young person that is a safety hazard and they're not getting any better, and they're not improving, and they're still a safety hazard to themselves and those around them, you can ask them to leave. And that could be, for behavioral issues, that could be for a variety of reasons. Before you do that, I would talk to your local office first and your 4-H county personnel, but make sure you do that. And within shooting sports, we do not accept inappropriate behavior. We do not, we really don't accept goofing around, that type of thing, especially if they've got the equipment with them. So the National 4-H Shooting Sports Committee provides leadership and management to curriculum and training. So they are the ones that put together the materials that you will get on Saturday for your discipline. They are also the ones that we have been working with to put together these materials. They provide image enhancement. One of the things that the National Shooting Sports Committee does every year is they're involved in, they have a booth at the SHOT Show. So they make sure that, all of the vendors at the SHOT Show know about 4-H and what we can do for them and how we can work together with them. They also, at a lot of the different big shows that they do that. And then they provide program oversight and continuity. And we're going to get into, in just a minute, some of the guidelines and policies that we have from the national. And then the members include, there's a state extension director. There are, well, I don't think that's true anymore. There are state 4-H program leaders that serve as co-chairs of that committee. There's typically 3 state program leaders that serve as chairs of that committee. There are 2 representatives from each of the regions. So there are 4 regions within our program. And those are typically paid staff, but there are a few volunteers on that committee. And then also there are technology and industry representatives. So federal ammunition does, I believe federal has a representative on that National Shooting Sports Committee. And there's some others, but I can't think of who they are right now. And then they are a nationally chartered 4-H organization. Many of you are familiar with the club charters that we do within our state, where every club has to be chartered. We have the same thing at the national level, where a lot of these working groups and a lot of the committees that are formed have to be chartered through the national organization. Some of the minimum standards. This is really to ensure the personal safety and the program integrity of our programs. So the National 4-H Shooting Sports Committee has developed a short list of non-negotiable minimum standards for states to adopt and abide by. And if you disregard these minimum standards, then it could potentially result in a significant liability and other legal ramifications. And so I will tell you that nationally, statewide, our university has, the University Police Department has taken taken these, and we have adopted all of them. And then we do have some higher standards. And so I am going to be sharing those. You will get a copy of those on Saturday, and I will, as we go through these, I will share them with you. So of those, so they're really around instructor and youth specifications, curriculum and training expectations, and then equipment, risk management, and targets. And they're and then we also have a set of best management practices. So those are guidance for programs, management and safety. So clothing, inventory control, ammunition, and storage and transport of equipment. And you're going to get a lot more information about these minimum standards in the 4th module. So of this, the National Committee provides curriculum and training. The disciplines that are included are archery, coordinator, hunting and outdoor skills, muzzle loading, pistol, rifle, shotgun, and then the newest one is Western Heritage. And within Nevada, we have not adopted the Western Heritage discipline yet, but it's something that we need to look at. We just haven't had the manpower, I think, or I haven't heard a lot of interest, but I think there probably could be. So for this, the instructor level. Oh, and I'll just briefly to tell you about what Western Heritage is. It's really what brings history to life. So the young people that are involved in that project research the late 1800s frontier culture. They develop a persona, and it includes a period-appropriate attire, and they make presentations. They also shoot several courses at fire at steel targets using a pistol, rifle, and shotgun in timed stages. So, it really is looking at that heritage. So just to quickly talk about the instructor level. So the training that you're going to be going through on Saturday is a level 1 certification. So that is, it's a current and approved 4-H volunteer locally. You have gone through the 12 to 15 hour state training. It is, you can, once you pass this, you can lead 4-H shooting sports programs at the club or the county level. You're not authorized to train or certify any other adult instructors. So the level 2 is that you've shown excellent level 1 proficiency and that you have passed a 40-hour national level 2 training. So what happens there is you can once you have completed at least a year as a level 1 instructor at the county level, you can then contact either your local extension personnel, or you can contact the state 4-H office and request that information about attending a nationally certified or nationally sponsored level 2 training. That is a 40-hour training, so it is a full Monday through Friday training that happens typically once or twice a year. They've been trying to go to twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. And then what happens from there is you can then turn around and do training at the state or at the state level. So our trainers that will be there on Saturday are level 2 trainers, so they can go ahead and train our state. They are also a level 2 trainer, or we call them nationally certified instructors. They are also members of our state 4-H Shooting Sports Advisory Council. And then a level 3 trainer is where every year the National Shooting Sports Committee reviews those level 2 instructors that have that extensive discipline and knowledge training, and then they have excellent teaching evaluations, and they then become nationally, they can then teach at the national level, at the national trainings. So it is, they do have a variety of ways to do that. Okay, are there any questions to this point? Okay. So now I'm going to talk briefly about our state shooting sports committee. And we do have an advisory committee in Nevada. It just got up and going again. But just as our national shooting sports, there's a national shooting sports committee, we do have a state shooting sports committee. And they they assist the state 4-H shooting sports coordinator with a variety of things. They will, and members of that committee are, the number of members are reflective on the state needs. So currently in Nevada, we have staff we have 2 staff four staff that represent on the committee, 2 from the northern area, 2 from the southern area. And then we have, I believe, 4 volunteers from each of those 2 areas that were selected based on an application process. And then we have 2 youth from that also represent, as well as our nationally certified instructors. So it's a pretty good sized committee, but it really does. And we also tried to look at the representation of disciplines that are offered. So we didn't want everybody to be archery instructors or everybody to be rifle instructors. We really tried to make sure we had geographic representation as well as disciplines. And their job is to provide input to the state coordinator. So they help in the creation, or they help in the revision of the state policies and procedures. They also strengthen internal communications, and they assist with state level activities or events. They were invaluable to me this year during the state shooting sports match. They were all running around helping out. So why are level 1 trainings required? And again, I get this question a lot from people. Well, I'm certified, I'm a certified hunter education instructor. I'm a certified NRA instructor. I'm a certified, NASP or USAA instructor, or former law enforcement or former military. And they want to know why they can't just automatically be certified as a 4-H shooting sports instructor. Well, the best answer for that question is always, why can't 4-H shooting sports instructors automatically qualify for those organizations? Well, okay, we all know that there are, we have different criteria and a unique focus than many of the other shooting-based entities. So, really, we can have a volunteer that has an extensive background about shooting, but not necessarily the background in youth development or risk management or safety. And so that is where it's really important, and that's where our training comes in. So we teach positive youth development. In the next segment, we're going to talk about positive youth development and really what that means and how to teach young people, etc. We're teaching adults to teach kids. That's what our training is focused around. I'll be perfectly honest with you, you're probably not going to get more than, oh gosh, if you even get 50 rounds out in shooting, that's doing pretty good, because our goal is for you to learn how to teach the kids. So there are extensive youth development resources. We have the integration of STEM education. There is some 4-H shooting sports STEM curriculum out there that we have available for you to use. And we, really focus on the development of those essential life skills and through those hands-on learning activities. It's also during our level 1 trainings, there's a clarification of responsibilities and expectations. So we want to make sure that we provide consistent understanding. It's not only understanding how the organization works, but it's also understanding our rules and regulations. And so, the other piece is the liability coverage. All of our volunteers receive liability coverage from the university. And because if you're operating within the scope of your assigned duties, so as long as you're following within the scope of what you're trained in on Saturday and Sunday, then you get university liability insurance. And I know I've already answered a couple of questions from individuals that questioned that and wanted to know about that. And so by proving to the university that we require this training, that really does make them feel a lot better. So the fundamental components of our level 1 workshops. So safety and risk management. This really is the focus of our training. It's the foundation that all 4-H shooting sports programs have. And during the past 30 plus years of the program, there have been over 150 billion person hours of educational content by 4-H shooting sports instructors with youth. And so that's a lot of hours. And at that time, there's only a few injuries that have been documented, probably less than a handful, less than 5. And none of those have been fatal. And so 4-H shooting sports actually remains one of the safest 4-H projects that we have. I've been through lawsuits where a young person, where a family, a young person cut their finger pumpkin carving. And they sued the university and they sued 4-H, etc., because that child needed to have their finger surgery on their finger, which is fine. But I've never been through a lawsuit with shooting sports. So it's not a matter of luck that we have such a good safety record. We require each of our instructors to go through an in-depth training and a safety training, and that you are required to develop a risk management plan that's specifically tailored for the facilities that you use for your program. That plan is it actually has to be turned into the state every year, and those are put into a file. So if there are any problems, we can come back and look at that. It's really important, to take that seriously. And also, of the 5 remaining areas that make 4-H shooting sports different than other youth shooting programs, it's starting with the first shot. You're going to be trained to teach the fundamentals such as proper handling of the equipment, the muzzle control, and basic sighting, so that the youth can safely take their first shot within 30 minutes of picking up that equipment. It's all, that's also what sparks that, that's what that spark is. That's what ignites that lifelong love of shooting sports. Volunteer training. Nationwide, there are more than 5,000 new 4-H shooting sports level 1 instructors that are trained and certified at state-sponsored workshops. So each state conducts multiple workshops throughout the year at different geographic locations. They offer a variety of disciplines. So when you complete that 12 to 15 hours of training, the instructor is certified to teach 4-H youth that specific discipline. Now, the one thing we need to remember is, okay, so if this weekend you're getting certified in archery, you cannot teach rifle or pistol or any of those. You can only teach in the discipline that you get trained in. We are working on trying to make it easier to get trained in additional disciplines, but currently, in a training, you can only get trained in one discipline. it's teaching teaching adults to teach kids. You know, it's instructors at state-sponsored 4-H shooting sports workshops revolve around the effective techniques in teaching kids. So it begins with understanding how youth learn, followed by how physical, emotional, and cognitive skills at different ages impact the youth's ability to learn. And we're going to talk about that more in Module 3. And finally, it's developing life skills. Through active 4-H shooting sports involvement, those youth acquire many valuable life skills. These include communications, empathy, leadership, teamwork, decision-making, self-discipline, personal safety, and even record keeping. These are the abilities that benefit our youth into their careers and throughout their entire adult lives. You know, when you ask most 4-H alumni what it is they remember, they're going to tell you, I learned to speak in front of a group, I learned good record keeping, I learned I learned leadership skills. Those are the things that they remember. They don't remember that they scored a 298 out of 300 in the state archery shoot. They may, but for the most part, they're going to remember that they may have won the state archery shoot, but they aren't going to necessarily remember the specifics. And, you know, research has shown that 4-H members are 4 times more likely to contribute back to their community than their non-4-H peers. And they're also twice as likely to make healthy choices and engage in STEM activities. So being in 4-H clearly makes a difference. And finally is positive youth development. This is really the bottom line for what happens within the 4-H program. It's the fuel that drives the gears and propels the program forward. And we're going to talk about that more in lesson 3. So as we look at this, as we look at drawing this module to conclusion, there are 3 final points to this. So it starts with the program priority pyramid. This is something that's some of you may not have seen. I know, depending on the program, you may not have seen, or depending on how long you've been involved, you may not have seen this, but I really like it. So competition is at the top portion of the pyramid, and sometimes that's really misconstrued by individuals as our primary objective. I know I fought having a state competition when I was in my previous job for a long time because I felt like it was going to hurt the program that we had built. We did eventually have a state match, and it really did. It did not hurt the program at all. But, if it's used appropriately and part of youth development, then that, it really is a portion of the pyramid. But just as a strong house, just as a house requires that strong foundation and sturdy walls for the roof to add value, that's where the competition really fits in. Recreation. This is a larger part of the pyramid. This is the hook that keeps the youth coming back. If it's not fun, then the kids are going to go somewhere else. Recreation also supports the concept of family involvement, uniting parents and the youth around the common interest. Families that play together stay together. We've all heard that phrase. It might be, if you decide at a meeting, maybe you do a parent-child shoot off or something. You'd have to figure out all the logistics and make sure you have the risk management issues in there. But what fun is that? That's a lot of fun for the kids, and it's recreation. Education. The next one is education. This really occupies that largest portion of the pyramid and provides a foundation. So while opportunities exist for positive youth development and the acquisition of life skills at all of the levels, our program priorities need to be anchored in education. And so without that focus, we tend to lose sight of and the support of our land-grant universities, and thus why we would lose the support of our entire 4-H program. And positive public perspectives. The second point I want to make here is to emphasize the role that we have in fostering a positive public perception of 4-H shooting sports. What we say what we say and what we do can dramatically impact how others within our communities view our programs. So there is a PowerPoint And actually, I will just look at my time. Okay. So this is a Second Amendment, common sense and words have meaning, and how they apply to 4-H. So what does the Second Amendment say? It's the right to keep and bear arms. So the actual wording is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, okay, there's several different versions of this. We all know, and especially lately, we've all been hearing all the different versions of it in the last few months. So from the Bill of Rights, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security for a free state in the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I will tell you, this summer I was able to take my son to Washington, D.C. on a National 4-H trip. And one of our adventures was going to the National Archives. That was one of the tours that they offered. And he was so excited more than anything to read that statement in the Bill of Rights. And so he had to search for it, but he did find it. So just a little key. But there's another version that's found in copies that are distributed to the states for ratification. And so a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So you can see that says the same thing, but look at the way it's written. The militia is not, look at the way it's written. So it's a word play. It's it's really definition. So there's two grammatical interpretations. Do you see the commas in there? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. And this is, however you stand on the Second Amendment, you have to look at the way we say things. There's also, there's also capitalization, people versus people. So individual rights versus collective rights, arms and arms suggests some, but not all. And the militia or militia, the military or the people. And then a well-regulated versus restricted or disciplined and trained. So the American Bar Association says there is probably less agreement, more misinformation, and less understanding of the right to keep and bear arms than there is any other controversial constitutional issue. Now, granted, that was in 1994, but I still think it's pretty true today. So where do you draw the line? You have the handgun ban in Chicago and Washington, D.C. It was overturned. The class 3 fully auto guns, and then the felons. So really, where do you draw that line in that interpretation is what it comes down to. And our own words within 4-H can be interpreted wrong. So the issues related to 4-H perception. Do contemporary people have an appreciation for the sporting tradition? So urban populations are growing, rural populations are shrinking. That's a fact. We all know that. There's a significant generational gap in the sporting tradition. No gun-oriented people generally view guns. Non-gun-oriented people generally view guns as bad. Okay, we've all seen these things. This is nothing. And why do you need one of those things? That happens quite a bit. We get that question. So is this on the back of your car? I'd rather place a sticker over, okay, you can see all of these. So, or these shirts, think about, if you've got, so I think about, okay, if you've got all 4 of these on the back of your car, it's nothing against you, but think about the 4-H shooting sports program and what is the perception out there? Again, shirts that you wear regularly. Do you wear shirts like that with 4-H with a 4-H hat? Words have meaning. So I want you to link these items together. What are those items? And if you can, if you want to unmute or if you want to type it in the box, what are those items? Oh, you know what, you guys? You know what you did? I forgot to share. Okay, can you guys see that now? Sorry. You got to remind, if you don't see anything on the screen, say Carrie share. Okay, so thank you, Heather, for telling me that. That was my bad. Okay. I'm going to go back though so you can see. Now you can understand what I'm saying. Okay, so here is, so now you guys can see this, the different interpretations of the word play. I'll give just a second. Okay, and then again, I'm just gonna skip over that part. So we have the perception, okay. So, okay, these are the stickers that are, the bumper stickers on the back of your car. And then a shirt that you wear regularly, maybe with a 4-H hat. Okay, so, and then this is what I want you to look at for the items. What do these items have in common? Anybody, can you guys think of what those are?
They're all tools.
Yes, they are all tools. Thank you. Yes. So now let's add in, did the groupings just change? Are they still tools?
Yes.
Okay, yes, they are. Some of these would be considered weapons. Is that accurate?
Yes, a baseball bat is very dangerous.
Yes. Yes, a baseball bat sometimes can be more dangerous, especially in my house some days with a 13-year-old who likes to swing it around. Okay, could they be considered weapons? Yes, every single one of these items can be considered a weapon in some sort of context. All of them can kill you. Exactly. So that's where we need to start really thinking about, and that's why within 4-H, and you'll hear this a lot on Saturday, we do not call anything in 4-H a weapon. They are firearms, archery equipment, air rifles, but they are not weapons. The instructors will break you of that habit, even if it requires money. At the national training, if you call things a weapon, it costs you money. You have to put in like $1 every time, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but it can be, requires a direct reference to the intention of the user. So it can be a weapon, but for our purposes, it is not. If the intent is to injure or kill somebody, it does become a weapon. And if we refer to firearms as weapons, it really instills that negative connotation that shooting sports and makes it easier to sell to the anti-gun legislation. So that's why we are very much will get you to break that habit. So think about if 4-H was linked to a school shooting, like happened in Columbine or just happened in Florida or any of those, think about what that would do. Or if our leaders turned out to be, these are getting to be, I need to have them update some of these names, but I think everybody knows who these individuals, you know, the Unabomber and David Koresh was a cult leader, etc. So think about that. What if one of those was linked to 4-H? So how does this apply to us? You know, it's not our job as 4-H leaders to interpret what the Second Amendment means. It's rather to instill in our youth and the public the value of the rights that we're given. And if as an individual you choose to take a more proactive stance, that's your right. But please keep in mind that your actions have that impact on how 4-H is perceived. So if you do choose to defend the Second Amendment, which, you know, I can't say a word because, you know, our house is very much that way. But please do not bring the 4-H program into that defense of the Second Amendment. And then we are a youth development organization first. We are not here to teach youth how to shoot. You know, that's a secondary goal. It is our job is to help youth grow, mature, and thrive. We use the disciplines as tools to achieve mastery, independence, belonging, and generosity. So as a leader, you're a role model. So be aware of the effect that your actions have on those youth that you're influencing and the public that you come in contact with. And we're not teaching kids what to think, but rather how to think. And so really, you know, we want to teach them how to think correctly. Okay, so what makes 4-H unique? Now you guys can see the slides. So focus on positive youth development. While the other organizations, you know, they do a great job on, you know, there's nothing against them, but they, you know, really offer extensive subject matter or tactical training and certification. We focus on the fundamentals of positive youth development. We provide appropriate youth-adult partnerships in developing critical life skills. So, you know, we're creating a supportive environment and appropriate youth-adult partnerships where youth can gain those skills. The STEM integration, you know, we strive to incorporate STEM activities, enabling the youth to discover the why and how related to 4-H shooting sports mechanics. That really enhances their educational experience. You know, I love it when I can go to a science fair and see something on the ballistics of a bullet or the trajectory. You know, it's something. It's so cool, and you know, most schools don't allow it, but you know, I've seen it a few times. And there is some curriculum, like I said, out of Colorado that gives you STEM activities that you can do around shooting sports. And, you know, we usually let people know, and if we need to, we can get you copies of that. It's also personal growth and civic engagement. You know, really keeping our motto of 4-H, our 4-H motto, to make the best better. You know, we want to help our youth gain proficiencies. And, you know, it's something that we trust our volunteers to do. So we don't focus on making champion shooters. It's great when it happens, but it's not our focus. We focus on developing champion kids. Okay, now that you've went through almost that whole module and did not see anything, do you guys have any questions? All right, does this group want to take like a 5-minute break, or do you want to just keep going? It's up to you. The next 2 modules are the big ones, so I want to make sure we get through them. But okay, keep going. Okay. I hope you guys know that if you have to go use the restroom, you can do that. I'm not going to stop sharing my screen now because I don't want you to I don't want to forget to do that again. Okay. So this is module 3 is creating and implementing a high quality program. So this is really where we are looking at looking at our program and how do we teach youth, etc. So volunteers are an important part of what we do and how we do it. As I mentioned before, there are 500,000 volunteers within the 4-H. That's just the 4-H shooting sports that's all 4-H programs. I think I said, now I can't remember what that number was. But there are 500,000 youth in 4-H, in 4-H shooting sports. But we have 500,000 4-H volunteers. And with that, they are working towards doing positive youth development. As a 4-H volunteer, you're a volunteer educator for the land-grant university in your state. You're actually considered a non-paid employee of the university, thus your insurance, etc. So what are we going to cover in this module? We're going to cover positive youth development, creating a high-quality program, elements of a quality program setting, solid teaching principles, strategies for effective teaching, ages and stages of youth development, and the art of teaching kids. So what is positive youth development? We're going to begin by defining that. So it is a program that is intentional. It doesn't just happen by accident. You have to utilize research-based practices that we know help youth grow and strive. That's one of the reasons why we have curriculum that we require volunteers to use, especially in shooting sports, because we know it is research-based or evidence-based practices. It has a pro-social approach to engaging our youth in their communities, their schools, their organizations, their peer groups, and their families. So what does that mean? Pro-social to me, what does that really mean? It means that our youth care about others, and that they take actions that reflect that caring. It's productive and constructive. The opportunities that we give are intentional. They intentionally are created for youth that are developmentally beneficial, they're valuable, and they're practical. We have to remember that youth slogan, or that 4-H slogan of learn by doing. They're actually going to get experience doing those. It focuses on the youth's strengths. We believe that youth are assets, and that we build upon those assets, or that they have assets, sorry. They are assets to us too, but they also have assets, and that we build upon those assets. We don't view the youth as if they're broken and they need to be fixed, but they're actually, we're going to build upon their needs. It's promoting positive outcomes for young people by providing them opportunities to learn, fostering positive relationships, both with adults and with their peers, and providing the support to build youth leadership skills. That's why it's really important that you have some type of youth-led leadership opportunity for young people within the clubs. So I mentioned this before about the 4-H shooting sports priority pyramid. It's a graphic that illustrates the facets of the 4-H shooting sports program. There are the 3 layers. And so the proportions of the pyramid are not by accident. The foundation is, in fact, everything that we do. It should have the educational base. And again, the recreation is an important component, and the competition is a part, but just not the most important part. It's really important to keep in mind as you're leading your club and training others that positive youth development is possible across all 3 layers, where and the education is the foundation for what we do. So this is a new model that's come out. It's called the 4-H Thriving Model. And this graphic really represents the most current thinking about positive youth development and how it works. You can see that there's 4 areas. There's the developmental context, there is the thriving trajectory, or, as young people move get the developmental context and they move through this cone, they're gaining and thriving. And then if they do that, then they gain the developmental outcomes and then our long-term outcomes. So if you look at that developmental context, this is a piece of the model where our volunteers have the most influence on our young people. It contains the components of a high-quality 4-H program or a club, and this is where the good things happen within our program. If it's done right, if this developmental context circle is done right, youth are placed on that thriving, they're moving towards that thriving, and that ultimately leads to positive outcomes. So we're going to look just quickly, we're going to look more closely at the developmental context. So we look at this and we have Spark. So we know that Spark is what brings the young people to the club. It is an opportunity for youth to find or foster their spark. Maybe we get a young person in the club that comes for archery, but maybe you offer different disciplines and they learn that they like, air rifle much better, or they like 22 much better. And so but they have that opportunity to be able to find that. It's also offering programs that follow program quality principles with the focus on youth belonging. We talked about it's really important. Young people want to feel like they belong to an organization and that they belong with their peers. And that's really where that program quality. And also the youth-adult partnership or youth-adult relationship. And so that's emphasizing developmental relationships with adults that are caring. They challenge growth, and that they share that power. Then you also have youth engagement in there. And so this is where it's the last piece of a quality program. And 4-H has the greatest impact on positive youth development when youth are fully engaged in the program. If you've got a young person that just kind of comes here and there, and maybe they're only involved in a year or maybe a couple years, you're not going to see the same results as if you get a young person that's engaged in the program, comes on a regular basis for multiple years. And so that's really, where we try to promote that youth they're encouraged to participate actively and regularly. And not just at the club level, but really trying to get them involved in other local events, other state events, national, or even international activities. So engagement includes the duration of their involvement, the intensity of their involvement, and the breadth of their experiences. And so really the research around this model has shown that intentionally providing that developmental context of a high quality program and encouraging youth engagement in 4-H programs are going to set those young people up for success. So solid teaching principles and strategies. We're going to switch gears just a little bit. So everybody develops their own teaching style as they begin working with 4-H program, and we understand that, everybody has their own teaching style, but the strategies and the principles need to remain consistent. So as part of the research base of the land-grant university, we have over time developed or adopted techniques that we know that are effective and safe in our teaching. So one of those is the first shot fundamentals. This one is really specific to shooting sports, but it's really applicable to any of our project areas. It's that first shot. So we spoke about learning by doing in the previous slide, and without the experience and the knowledge that's acquired by doing a particular task, it's really hard for a young person to understand and comprehend what the educator is teaching. So let's put it another way. If the student has never held a pistol in their hands, then, or fired a pistol, it's really difficult for them to understand the intricacies of the grip and the stance and the breath control and the sight picture and the sight alignment. And so really to assist the students in that learning process, our 4-H shooting sports educators and volunteers need to practice what's called first shot fundamentals. It's simply recognizing that the value of getting the youth to the line quickly and safely to fire successful first shots. So once a youth has successfully fired, a shot or two, they have that better comprehension of what a firearm feels like in their hand, how it behaves once it's fired, and what it feels like to align the sights and control their breathing. Rules and policies. As a 4-H leader, you're often called upon to act as the authority. I mean, you know that. Your knowledge of the 4-H club rules, the 4-H shooting sports contest rules, 4-H policies and procedures is really important. Whether you're asked by a youth member, a parent, or the media, it's important that you're able to give a clear, concise, precise, and accurate answers. Take the time to learn about the local 4-H program and the applicable rules, policies, and procedures. And just so you know, it's okay if you don't know all the answers. It's always better if you don't know to say that you don't know and that you're going to find out that answer. Never make up something as a fact if you're not sure. You know, people will generally allow you time to find the right answer and tolerate that much better than if you give them an inaccurate answer that later proves to be wrong. So if you get asked something, you know, it's okay to send myself or to send your county 4-H personnel that question. It's, you know, I get that all the time and I'm good with that. I'd rather answer your question and have it be correct than you to give false information. Dress code. So most 4-H programs have a dress code for the youth. As a leader, you need to always adhere to the same dress code as your youth and be able to be ready to explain why the way we dress is important for safety and professionalism. You know, these are the two reasons in part that that we have the dress code while participating in a 4-H activity. You know, in Nevada, we require closed-toed shoes at shooting sports events. They can't wear sandals or you know, anything like that. You know, it's all listed in the rules, and I can't think of what they all are. I know that there is a dress code for like the awards assembly, but then we also have a dress code for safety and professionalism during the shoot. Behavior and sportsmanship. You know, it's easy, especially in the heat of competition, to forget the reason that we're involved in the 4-H program. We all want our kids to perform well and to be successful, but sometimes those successful outcomes in the program are often much more subtle than the champion ribbon or a state medallion, etc. You know, a youth that models good behavior in the face of disappointment or demonstrates good sportsmanship are much more meaningful long-term behaviors that we hope that our 4-H youth achieve in the program. You know, and that's something we might want to think about. Stanton and a few of you that are on the state committee, we might want to think about at the state match doing an award for sportsmanship or something like that. I think that would be a great way to instill that behavior. Youth learn these behaviors and traits from the people that they look up to and that they aspire to be like. So more than likely, that person is you as the volunteer. So you need to remember that youth are always watching and always model good behavior and emphasize the importance of sportsmanship. I know it's tough, but we need to, you know, it's critical. Hands-on technique. From the beginning, 4-H has recognized the importance of hands-on or experiential learning that happens in the field, not just in the classroom. It really exemplifies real-life situations and experiences. Again, you know, we have the 4-H slogan of learning by doing, and 4-H educators really value and adhere to that practice whenever possible. Education that takes place in real-life situations has a huge impact on our youth, but it also comes with some inherent risk. Managing that risk is what we're going to learn about in Module 4 is really important. One of the ways that we can manage that risk is by working with youth using the appropriate hands-on technique. So we know that in real life situations, there are times that we need to touch or reposition a young person. Just as it's hard to learn to flip a lamb when you're shearing without somebody helping you to position yourself correctly to use the leverage of your body, sometimes that's true in shooting sports. And so we use this hands-on technique, and your instructors on Saturday and Sunday are going to show you that technique. It's just, you know, I want to talk about it. So you need to explain at the beginning of the year what that hands-on technique is and how you're going, you know, and how you will reposition a youth if need be. You need to ask the child, and then if the parent happens to be right there present, if they're okay with you touching them, to adjust their position. Prior to touching that youth, you should announce in a voice loud enough for the adjoining youth to hear, "I'm going to touch you now and move you to the proper position." Then ask for permission. Is that okay with you? Always touch the youth with an open hand, or the back of your hand if possible. You should avoid grabbing or clutching or gripping that youth. You know, just by using those simple steps, it's going to avoid confusion or suspicion regarding the adults touching youth. And we know that it has to occur. So teaching for an early success. It's important. An important part of being a volunteer and an educator is teaching for early success. Quality education allows the students to feel successful in their new knowledge and their skills, and that they use that confidence and their success as building blocks to achieve increasingly difficult goals. Recognizing and rewarding early successes will allow the youth to gain the confidence needed to master increasingly difficult tasks. You know, that could be as simple as we were at my son's shooting sports event last year, and there was one young lady that they were doing archery, and she missed the target every single time. And the one or two times that she actually hit the target, we made a very big deal about her actually hitting the target. Didn't matter that it wasn't in the circles at all, but she actually hit the target. And that is, you know, that again is, you know, recognizing and rewarding that success. And you know what? She got better and better and better. And that's just what you have to, you know, it's those early successes. It may be something as simple as hitting the bag target. Modeling behavior. You know, 4-H members are like little sponges. I mean, we all know they're soaking up the way the adults behave and dress and talk and act. You know, as 4-H leaders, we're role models for young people. What is said and done, our actions, and even the things posted on social media sites will be modeled by our youth. So we need to remember to always be professional in our actions and interactions with members. Be a positive influence on those young people's lives. Concise, step-by-step instruction. Know when they need to know it. So by and large, educators are really, and volunteers are really passionate about the subject that they teach, and generally they have a huge wealth of knowledge about that subject. But it's important to always remember that it's easy to overwhelm your students. You need to practice concise, step-by-step instructions. Just when the student needs to know it. Give the students time to, to understand, to learn, and to practice the simple steps before moving into a new and more difficult technique. And the experiential learning model. Some of you may have seen this in the past. It's really, it has long been the process of 4-H youth development. In fact, it was mentioned earlier as our slogan, learn by doing. We know that kids and adults often learn best by hands-on activities or being a tactile or kinesthetic learner, if you're familiar with learning styles, that engage them in that learning process. For that reason is why we really look at the experiential learning process and why we employ that whenever possible. It's really quite simple. Start with any hands-on activity. You do the activity, you reflect on what you did, and then you apply the learning that happened to a real life situation. So do, reflect, apply. Let's put it now in a context that we can understand. We're teaching kids about sight alignment. We could stand in front of them and lecture about how to properly align the sights of a firearm. We could use the experiential learning model or learning process. If we use this process, we can conduct a hands-on activity. Maybe having teams make a large front and rear sights out of cardboard, then demonstrate how to properly align them up and down, right and left. This is the do part of the experiential learning. Once the youth have mastered aligning the cardboard sights, we reflect on what we learned and why it's important. If your sights aren't aligned properly and you don't consistently align the sights, you're never going to hit the same place twice, except by accident. Then we apply what we're learning by doing in an exercise like the triangulation exercise that's found in the pistol or the rifle curriculum. So if you're taking archery, then we can probably share with you that. But you can also have them talk about if they're, because it is November and it is hunting season. You could talk about, if your sights aren't aligned properly, you're going to miss that. You're going to miss that huge buck. So the do, reflect, apply will create a circle of mutually reinforcing activities that are going to help that 4-H member retain and perform that activity. The next one is on essential elements. I introduced you to the thriving model of youth development. Some people may have heard about the essential elements of youth development and the targeting life skills model. These are two pieces that we have used pretty extensively in 4-H for the past few decades, and they haven't gone away. They haven't, they're still a key component to our program. Many of our experienced leaders have recognized that the opportunity to belong is one of the essential elements of positive youth development. It's so critically important to create a space for belonging, for mastery, for independence and generosity within the 4-H project. And likewise, youth are in a well-run program are consistently honing their skills that are found in the targeting life skills model and gaining those 21st century competencies. So these skills are outcomes of a successful 4-H program. So, that sense of belonging, they feel both physically and emotionally safe in that environment, that they have a chance to learn new skills through the mastery, that they feel like they have a voice and that they are listened to in the independence, and then generosity, that they're giving back to their community. So to be an effective teacher, it's really critical that you understand ages and stages of youth development. If you will not be successful if you're asking a youth to do things that they aren't capable of doing or don't want to do. And so there's a lot of information out there about ages and stages. This is one piece of it, or this is one model that is used, but it has good. So if you're looking at early childhood, so youth that are ages 5 to 8, this is what we call clover buds within the 4-H program. These are children that of this age are learning to master their physical skills. They're using large muscle groups for running, jumping, and climbing. They're also beginning to develop those fine motor skills like tying their shoes. It's really important that we remember as we're working with this age group, they're in relationship to their physical development, we need to focus on activities that encourage the use of large motor skills more than fine motor skills. That, socially, these children are learning to develop relationships, and they may have several best friends. They can fight with each other, but they really, at this point, get over those fights fairly quickly. Emotionally, this age group are very focused on themselves. They have a hard time understanding anyone else's point of view. And intellectually, these youth base their thoughts on concrete ideas, not abstract ideas. So needless to say, for a variety of reasons that kind of fit into this category, we do not allow youth of this age group to participate in the 4-H shooting sports program. If something were to happen and you had a youth in a program that it was of this age, then that does not fall within the scope of your position, and I will tell you, you will not be represented by the university in a liability case. They will say you're on your own. So it's really important. This is the age group that they're very excited, and this is the one that I get all the parents that call me and say, but my child has grown up with this, and they've been doing it since they were 6 months old, riding a horse since they were 6 months old. That's fabulous. But I also have I've got that 5-year-old that may be able to do it, but I've got a 5-year-old child over here who's never been on a horse, and they do not have the same skills. And what we have to create the program for the large, it's not individual case-by-case basis. We have to look at the whole picture. There are lots of opportunities for young people in Clover Buds. So we look at middle childhood, kind of that 9 to 11-year-old. This is one of our largest groups in 4-H. It is really, this is where we have a lot of kids. So this group is very active, especially if you've been around these lately. They cannot sit still easily for long periods of time. This is girls will mature faster, will mature before boys. And this is really where active learning experiences are essential. This is not where you can have, 3 people on the line and 4 people standing in the back. You're going to completely lose those 4 people in the back. You've got to figure out how you can work with this age group so nobody is resting idly, because they will not be resting idly. They will be messing around. Socially, children of this age want to be with their own sex. Boys with boys, girls with girls, and after all, we all know that boys have cooties, and we don't want to be around them. So it's really, this is where you might, it's okay to have girls shooting archery and boys shooting air pistol, or, however you can make it work. Or having girls on one side of the line and boys on the other side of the line. Emotionally, they want everything to be fair or equal. They often judge things on absolutes. There's no middle ground with this age group. An idea is either wonderful or it's disgusting. And intellectually, this group is easily motivated and they're eager to try new things. However, they may lose interest very quickly. Simple, short lessons are important for this age group, and keeping the learning experiences brief. You're probably not going to want to spend 3 hours on archery. You're going to want to do a variety of things at your club. Providing a variety of learning experiences and activities ensures success for each child. So now we look at the 12 to 14-year-olds, and this is the one that I have the most experience with right now because I have a 13-year-old at home. So I'm learning this one really well. But, at this age group, they're experiencing a lot of physical changes. This is where they're really starting to enter puberty. Boys' voices are changing. The boys are experiencing large growth spurts. And this is where boys finally start being bigger than girls in stature. Boys and girls are concerned about their body image. As you work with this age group, you need to be sensitive to their feelings and avoid comments that criticize or compare youth physically. This is where you need to watch the youth you need to watch for youth making fun of others and put a stop to it immediately and avoid hurt feelings. And I will tell you, so my son plays football, and this year was probably the toughest year in football I have ever had. There were more tears on the field than I have ever seen, because this age group, it fits right in with this. If somebody made a comment about you're too small or you're too you're not fast enough, or, it's crazy. And if you don't think that boys won't cry, if you think that boys don't cry, yeah, you're wrong. I've seen girls cry too, but man, I thought my 13-year-old son they kept telling me, oh, he'll be easy, you won't cry much. Yeah, just as much as girls. But socially, children of this age prefer activities that involve both boys and girls. They're more interested in what their peers have to say than what their parents' advice is. This is where they're becoming more opinionated and independent, and they tend to reject solutions from adults because they feel like their solution is better. As a parent and as a 4-H volunteer, you know that that's a very challenging time in life, but we will all get through it. So, and it's really, I was telling one of my colleagues the other day, my son is learning how to debate, and he's very big. He's very big into the Second Amendment, into all the gun rights and all of this. And it's really fun to watch him grow into that. Sometimes I have to have the conversation of, okay, let's figure out when it's appropriate to say these things and when it's not appropriate to say these things. But it's really fun to watch him grow into that and to see that. So, it's important to select activities that they want to achieve instead of just focusing in on the group goals. This is where you can start doing independent goals. Children at this age still tend to compare themselves to others. Sometimes we can characterize them as drama kings or drama queens, very much so. Their emotions are all over the place. 1 minute they're happy, they're having a great time. The next minute the world's against them, or something happened. You need to be careful at this point not to embarrass or criticize these children. You need to help them, explore their identity, their values, their beliefs by providing activities that challenge their thinking in these areas. So, let young people at this age assume responsibility for planning events and activities. And, set expectations that they follow through with their duties. At the intellectual development for this age group, it's expanding to include more abstract thinking. They're beginning to understand the cause and effect, and that they're ready for more in-depth and long-term experiences. As we work with this age group, it's really important that we give them real life problems to solve, and that we need to help them to make decisions and evaluate the results so that they can learn from those mistakes and celebrate those achievements. It's at this age group that they thrive on service learning projects, that they help identify the area of need and totally plan the activity. The next one is our teens, our 15 to 18-year-olds. Typically, teenagers are approaching maturity with their physical development, and they're concerned frequently about their body image. Acne, weight, physical activity, and other issues are concerned to them. They're impressionable when it comes to their physical appearance, and they can be easily misguided by advertisements and the emphasis that society places on physical appearance. When you're working with teens, it's important to avoid comments criticizing their appearance, just as it is with the younger group, and imply that their physical appearance is related to who they are inside and their success or their happiness. In the social development, this age group desires status among their peer groups. This is where the popular group comes in. Although they want to be part of a group, they also want to be recognized as individuals. They're interested in co-educational activities and dating. They are learning how to make commitments and to follow through. It's really important to encourage the social development by involving them in the planning of their own programs and holding them accountable for the success or the failures of those plans. It's important to emphasize the personal development and leadership skills with teens. Their emotional characteristics around respect, developing confidence, and developing independence are important. They're looking for ways to express their uniqueness, and they really want approval from their peers. They're also developing their own set of values and beliefs. So as that teen matures, we need to encourage their emotional development by letting them assume more responsibilities and helping them and continuing to challenge their thinking and their on identity, values, and beliefs. Encourage them to work with youth-adult partnerships to achieve a common goal. And intellectually, this age group includes the mastery of abstract thinking and their ability to imagine how their behavior can impact the future. They like to show others what they have learned. This age group does not do well with meaningless activities or things that just take up time. You have to give them something that means something to them. Now, I will tell you, there has been a little bit, there's been a lot of brain research in the last several years regarding when your brain fully develops. And so it does impact a little bit of this. What they're finding out now is the brain is not fully developed, especially in decision-making abilities, until at least age 25. And so when we think about, young people, it says here that they, where did I see that? I saw it somewhere. Oh yeah, their ability to imagine how their behaviors can impact the future. We need to think about, our brain isn't fully developed until age 25. So there may be some, what we may have thought that they were capable of in the past may not be the case in, going forward. We just, you need to keep an eye on that with young people. Are there any questions related to kind of the ages and stages? I think probably the biggest takeaway from this is we should not be asking a 5-year-old to do the same thing that we are asking a 15-year-old to do, or we should not be asking a 9-year-old the same thing that we're asking even a 13 or 14-year-old to do. There are different stages, and that is really what is critical. Now, granted, I said we shouldn't be asking a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old. Sometimes I think 5-year-olds and 18-year-olds, sometimes they act the same. So, it's just one of those, but we do need to remember that we should not be asking them to all do the same thing. Okay, the art of teaching kids. I'm going to go through this one fairly quickly. I'm going to let you, a lot of this I'm going to let you read when you look through, when you get your handouts. But I just want to, so the ABCs of teaching, the ability and balance with challenge. So it's important that as a volunteer that you balance a youth's ability with the amount of challenge that you give them. So the groundwork for this is really looking at the zone of proximal development. So you look at the challenge and the ability. You are going to, it represents that zone of learning is where you want the youth to stay. However, if the balance is not correct and the youth struggles with that activity, then if a child has a lot of ability but is not challenged enough, they're going to consider the club boring. So we've all seen this before, right? We've also seen this one, where if a child has too much challenge but not enough ability to meet that challenge, they're going to consider the club boring as well. So what you need to do is figure out how you can keep that child balanced with just the right amount of challenge to meet their ability. And that's where you get engagement. So the model works like this. We start with a child who is capable of only handling a small challenge that's within their low ability level. So they're at a lower quadrant of the model. To move that young person through the zone of learning to a higher level of knowledge and capabilities, you need to first figure out how to challenge them just a little bit, enough to make them slightly uncomfortable, but then let them practice until they improve their skills and they're back in their comfort zone. That's the zone of learning. Then we let them experience a higher challenge. And then let their ability catch back up. We repeat this sequence until we have ratcheted them up to having the ability to handle challenging situations. It looks kind of like a small staircase of successes. So we put that child on a thriving trajectory, or, you know, on that thriving pathway, and give them the ability to handle the increasingly challenging situations. So, does everybody understand that? I hope so. So the art of teaching kids. So this is looking at, you know, we need to focus, as leaders, we need to focus on the kids. So when we think about this, I'm just going to give you a few examples of some things that maybe we don't, some perspectives of our young people. Every year, Beloit College out of Wisconsin puts together a list for their faculty that will give them a sense of mindset for the incoming freshman class. So think about the students, and one thing that I learned when I looked at this year's list, I did not even think about it. This year's freshman class in college is the first class of Gen Z. You know, we've talked a lot about the millennials being, you know, being young people that we work with. They are now completely in the workforce. Our Gen Zs, which are our young people that we're working with now, are now starting to enter college. So just think about that. But they have no idea that Americans were ever held hostage in Iran. And they think that bottle caps have always been the screw-off kind because they've never had anything else. They have no idea what the phrase sounding like a broken record means, because, well, and I think they're starting to get more vinyl records, but, you know, it's not something. They didn't know that voicemail replaced an answering machine, and before that there was nothing. You know, my son and I were actually talking on the way to school the other day about cell phones, and I said, you know, I didn't have that. If you were late getting home from, you know, wherever, your mother was in a panic because she had no way to get a hold of you. And that was just such a foreign concept to him. They think that Jimmy Fallon has always been the host of The Tonight Show, that popcorn can only be made in the microwave. They don't know that who Mork was or where he came from. They've never heard Where's the Beef, I'd Walk a Mile for a Camel, or DePlane Boss, DePlane. And they can't imagine not having a remote control for the TV. Most of them can't even fathom the idea of having a TV that has more than 3 stations. So their lifetime has always included AIDS, and there's always been MTV in their lifetime. And so, and then think about, so that's kind of in the mindset of a college student. Now think about the mindset of a 9-year-old. So here's things that 9-year-olds have said, or that young people have said. I've learned that if you spread peas out on your plate, it looks like you've eaten more. That comes from a 6-year-old. I've learned that you should never jump out of a 2nd-story window using a sheet for a parachute. 10-year-old said that. I've learned that you shouldn't confuse a black crayon with a Tootsie Roll. And that came from a 10-year-old. I've learned that when you have 3 of your wild friends in the car, the driver freaks. 9-year-old. I've learned that you can't hide a piece of broccoli in a glass of milk. That was from a 7-year-old. I've learned that when I wave at people in the country, they stop what they're doing and wave back. I've learned that if you laugh and drink soda pop at the same time, it will come out your nose. I've learned that goldfish don't like Jell-O. And I've learned that girls sweat just as much as boys. And that was from an 11-year-old. So, you know, it's important that, you know, to always teach to your audience and not above them, and realize that our program is all about youth. So the next one is the TM. And so what TM, what do you think it stands for? Okay. Is everybody still asleep? It stands for teachable moment. And, you know, time management, that could be one, but it's teachable moment. And so, you know, you're going to get teachable moments with young people all the time. And so it's really important. Sometimes we actually have to set up our teachable moments. It's like setting a trap, and it can be done very easily. And when that trap is sprung, that's when, you know, they learn, the young people learn. They know that they've been set up, but it's really critical sometimes to take those moments. It's also important to know that it's okay to make mistakes for both the youth and for the adult leader. You know, sometimes those teachable moments come from mistakes that we make. However, you know, as we allow our young people to make mistakes, it happens in a safe and controlled environment. Those are the most powerful experiences. You know, if teaching someone to operate a chainsaw, it's best not to let them mess up too bad. Same with a firearm. You know, you want to make sure that everything is completely safe. And, you know, really, if we think about those true lifelong lessons that we've learned, those come from the mistakes that we've made. And if we don't ever allow young people to make mistakes, then we've done injustice to our young people. But the biggest thing is we have to be there to help them learn from those mistakes. So this is leaving them on a high point. You know, I talked about, you know, celebrating the little successes. And I think that's, you know, that's really where this comes into play. The debrief. So what does this have to do with teaching our kids? Educators a lot of times do it, and volunteers do a great job about teaching, but they stop to discuss what happened and really drive home their educational message in that debriefing session. So debriefing is that second step in the education or experiential learning. So remember the do, reflect, apply. And did the wrong one. And it's important that we all have fun. It is, you know, if we don't incorporate fun, it's not going to be very effective, and they're not going to keep coming back. So we have to, if your educational event isn't fun, you're going to find yourself teaching to yourself. TSI, tell me, show me, involve me. This concept comes back to the root of 4-H and the premise that youth learn best when they're actively engaged in the learning process. You know, learn by doing. The doing is important. TSI, learn by doing, and experiential learning that are different ways of saying the same thing. Okay, lectures, and I know this portion is very much a lecture base. That's the one disadvantage of doing this session like this, because we can't do the hands-on learning that I like to do. So please, you know, as we're moving forward, this is not necessarily the model that we would always. We don't want to model this for our young people. Okay. If you just tell somebody how to do it, they're not going to usually remember. If you show them how to do it, they might remember. And if you involve them in the learning process, they're going to understand and will likely never forget it. And so part of that is, you know, if you've ever heard the adage of somebody needs to hear, do, and see something 7 times to remember it, then that kind of falls into that same category. Okay, so SPE. So any ideas of what this might stand for? Any thoughts? Okay, so just one hint. This came from Ron Howard, who was one of the founding members of the National Shooting Sports Program. He said that very few young people are interested in a program that overtly focuses on coping competencies and contribution skills. The concept of life skill development is neither attractive nor exciting. As a result, these elements are embedded in hands-on experiential learning in subject matter that is fun. Leaders and coaches must understand their role in teaching life skills, and they must carefully coat the medicine of life skills education with the easily swallowed activity of shooting and related interests. So, any thoughts on what SPE might stand for? Okay, so S stands for sneaky. We aren't teaching life skills overtly. We have to carefully coat the medicine of the life skills with easily swallowed activities of shooting sports. So we do it covertly. So if kids don't really know that they're learning how to transition, so that children don't really understand or don't really know that they're learning how to transition into adulthood. The P stands for prophylactic. So, okay, before you snicker too hard, you need to consider that word. The root of the English word prophylactic comes from the Greek word prophylactikos something, and it means preventable or protective. So anybody in the medical field, anybody in the medical field will confirm that this is true. Therefore, SPE stands for Sneaky Prophylactic Education, which really means preventable or protective education delivered in a covert manner. So I'm going to put it in another way. So you take a 9-year-old child and let them run the streets without any proper supervision until they're 18. What are the odds that that young person is going to grow up to be a contributing member of society? Probably not really good. And if we take that same young person and put them in with positive peer groups, with a caring adult for guidance, and we teach them the life skills they need to thrive into adulthood, what are the odds of them becoming a contributing member of society? Probably much better. That is the preventative part that we do in 4-H. If we've had fun with that young person for those 9 years and they don't even realize that it's happened to them, that's the sneaky part. All right. So that's the end of Module 3. Now we get into the meat of everything, or into the big part of everything. And I have about 40 minutes to do this in. Are there any questions about that module? Okay. So we are going to talk about risk management, or as it's more commonly referred to in this, is covering your assets. The picture in this slide is really done for a purpose. It's meant to demonstrate the deleterious potential, or the chance for great harm, if we don't pay attention to risk management. You can see, that clay can really, and be hurt, and it looks like it's flying through I don't know. So an overview of this module. So the 4-H we're going to talk about 4-H members and firearms, the case for shooting sports, the national minimum standards, the state level best practices, your risk management plan, and the risk management model. So before we start the first section of this module, I want to discuss an activity that we've all participated in and with which we've had great fun as a participant, the birthday piñata. Is this a safe activity? Probably depends. If it's conducted with no rules, no adult supervision, and a blindfolded teen boy swinging a baseball bat to break the piñata, it can quickly become a very deadly game. What would make this a safe activity? Give me some rules that you think would make it safe. So if you can, if you want to type them in the chat box or unmute and share some. Okay, no blindfold, that could be one. Other thoughts? Okay, space, yep. Okay, adult supervision, that's a good one. Yep. Okay, what about using a less lethal device? Like instead of using a real baseball bat to break the piñata, maybe you use a broomstick or a plastic baseball bat. Having a signal like a whistle for the person swinging the piñata to stop. Because, you know, everybody's always screaming and yelling, so they're not going to hear maybe stop, but they would hear a whistle. Having a barrier drawn on the floor with tape and a garden hose for the other participants not to cross. That we had that one for space. And then having adult supervision close at hand. So, you know, we really need to think about every activity that we conduct with a critical eye and ask yourself, what is every wild and crazy bad thing that could happen with this activity? And you're going to, you know, and then you engineer those bad things out in the activity, just as we, you know, just like we did in the piñata example. And so, you know, I'm always accused of being the, you know, kind of the fun police, or I'm always the first one to think about risk management. And I mean, automatically, my thought always goes to risk management. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's related to work or home or anything. Drives my family crazy. But it's just a nature of my job. It's what I've done, and it's always been, you know, always been there. So we're going to talk about about 4-H members and firearms. So there was an article published. Dr. Jeff Goodwin, who is the program leader in Hawaii, wrote an article that's going to be published in our Journal of Extension magazine. It's our research journal for extension professionals, and it's really talking about once the article is published, I'm going to share it with all of our 4-H volunteers, because it's really a great article to share with our university officials and with anybody that questions us about why we do 4-H shooting sports. So from that, and this is kind of a companion piece to that, but as incidences of human violence make the news, and it seems like every single day there's something new on the news. You know, extension professionals are working with 4-H shooting sports, and we must be able to communicate the following to our university administrators and legal counsel. I will tell you, in the last year, with all of the shootings that have happened and all of the things that have happened, you know, lately, I have gotten a lot of phone calls. You know, I get phone calls from the university president, from the dean of our college, etc., asking me about 4-H shooting sports. And the nice thing is, you know, now I've got something that I can really use, but it's also, you know, I've been able to defend the program, and because it is, you know, such a huge program. But it isn't, you know, we need to look at our program priorities. Oops. So what are the priorities of the 4-H shooting sports program? You know, when you think about our instructional focus of the program, it's the safety record of our program and the rationale for, a rationale for introducing youth to firearms. Those are what we have to talk about. You know, it's not a defensive justification of the program. The article is not a defensive justification. It's just a demonstration in the relevance and the safety of our 4-H program as we reach 500, you know, 500,000 youth every year across this country. In Nevada, I think I don't know if I said the number, we're at about 3,500 youth in the shooting sports program in one way or another. It is one of our single largest projects that we have. So we're going to go back to this program priority. So when we think about the youth development mission, you know, we need to look at this model. And we've talked about the base being about education. You know, 4-H program in each state is conducted and managed through the land-grant university, and that we must, you know, for us to be involved, it must be grounded in education. The recreation, then that's the next level. The reason that recreation is important is that's what serves as that hook or that thing that keeps kids and families coming back. If whatever we do in 4-H is not fun for the kids or fun for the families that are involved, those people are going to vote with their feet, and they're going to spend their valuable time, their free time, somewhere else. They're going to go to another organization. So fortunately, with the 4-H shooting sports program, we have a wide variety of interesting, challenging, and fascinating aspects that keep people coming back for more. And as we look at the top of the pyramid, it's competition. It sits at the top of this model because of it, not because it's an important aspect of the shooting sports program. It sits on top because many times that's the most visible part of the program. Competition in youth development program can provide those young people goals to which they can strive to accomplish. And, again, this year, and I didn't even realize it when we planned it, but the state shooting sports match happened to fall on the 1-year anniversary of the shooting in Las Vegas, or real close to that time frame. And I got back. Like I said, it didn't even dawn on any of us. And we actually had the date set a year and a half out. So, it was set even before that all occurred. But I got back and got questioned by administration about, was that appropriate? Did we, should we have done that? Should we have even had the shooting sports match in Las Vegas, etc.? And, I was able to come back and say, and I gave them the whole spiel, and they seemed satisfied with it. And I felt like we did an okay job at the state match of, recognizing it and doing a, moment of silence. So. But as we also think about this, parents often tell us that another sideline benefit to the shooting sports competition is that our young people learn how to focus their development of their marksmanship skills. They also learn, they're learning to focus on those marksmanship, but they also learn to focus in order to study for tests in their school life. And, I've seen that with kids in my son's own club. Where these kids are borderline, ADD, and because they learn how to focus with shooting sports, they're becoming more focused in the other aspects of their lives. And so, again, it's the biggest part of our program, but it needs to run parallel with the positive youth development. Positive youth development needs to be running all along here in all aspects of it. So, instructional focus of the shooting sports program. So we have life skill and positive youth development. It's to acknowledge potential concerns that the shooting sports program is introducing 4-H members to firearms. And it's important for us to make sure that everybody is aware of the 4 concepts that drive the instructional component of the shooting sports program. Life skill development, positive youth development are our primary missions. We've talked about this already, so I'm not going to really talk about it again. PYD is intentional, pro-social, etc. Training adults to teach kids. Again, this is another standard that we have. We are the only 4-H program at any level that requires additional training. And this additional, requires this level of additional training for instructor and volunteers. And a lot of our programs are starting to look at that and thinking about that, especially some of the higher risk programs. Teaching the first shot. This is, again, another one that is really critical. We specialize in teaching young people to shoot their first shot and to shoot that first shot safely. And so we are teaching them the proper, responsible, and safe use of firearms and archery equipment. And then safety, again, this is a high priority for our shooting sports program. This is our main focus of the 4-H shooting sports program. It's to instill fundamental safety standards and ensure those standards become second nature to those 4-H youth. We do not, within the 4-H shooting sports program, we do not condone or promote simulated combat sports such as paintball, because those activities run counter to the safety principles that we reinforce within 4-H. And then, you know, our mission mandates. And so it's more than just about shooting. It's about all of these other things. So let's take a look at the safety record of the 4-H shooting sports program. There are 500,000 youth reached in 2016. Again, you know, I said about a 250,000 of those are in the club program, about 250,000 are in camps, fairs, etc. Program began in 1980. Think about if in 2016 we reached 500,000 youth. So dating back, you know, to 1980, there are millions of youth that have been reached. And through that, from 1980 to 2016, there have only been 6 documented injuries. Of those, none of those were serious or life-threatening injuries. So as we assess the risk of this program, it's important to remember that the 4-H program makes use of we do have supplemental health insurance as a risk management tool, and that 4-H shooting sports programs are assessed at the same rate as other 4-H projects because the insurance company feels so strongly that safety is the #1 priority. And so the horse and the ATV programs do pay a premium rate. They are double what everybody else pays. Okay, here's another example. So this is just kind of a further assessment. It's, you know, if we look at this data, the total participation rates of this is the 2014 data, and the injury data is from 2013. But it's the most uniform data that's available to compare the examination of youth sports injuries. So the first column to the left is a specific sport. The next column to the right is a participation rate of this sport. And the third column is a total number of annual injuries that require medical attention. And the last one is to the right is the annual injury rate for each sport that was obtained by dividing the number of injuries to the number of participants. As you can see, football has the highest injury rate with 6.7% of the youth who play football each year suffering an injury that requires medical attention. Wrestling was next on the list with 4.8 of the youth wrestlers participating requiring medical attention. And then we go down the list with hockey injuries at 1.4. And notice the annual injury rate for 4-H shooting sports is in the hundred thousandths of a percent because of the rarity of injuries to over the history of the program. So, you know, it's also important to note while the current annual reach of the 4-H shooting sports program is often quoted as 500,000, the enrollment data from this table, you know, was 300,000 essentially. So when you compare youth sports injury comparisons, a young person is 42,500 times more likely to be injured playing soccer than if they were in 4-H shooting sports. That same young person would be 167,500 times more likely to be hurt playing football versus shooting sports. And I can contest to that. Because I have my son plays football and does 4-H shooting sports, and this year he went to the hospital because of football. And has never had to go to the hospital because of shooting sports. So when you think about it, in short, 4-H shooting sports is one of the safest activities that we have for our youth. So what's the rationale behind introducing youth to firearms? You know, there are always people that raise those concerns about youth having access to firearms. And then those individuals that, are concerned about 4-H shooting sports mixing kids and guns. You know, we all get it all the time. So the rationale behind introducing youth to shooting sports is simple. For youth who are curious about or have an interest in firearms and archery, the shooting sports program, the 4-H shooting sports program, assures that they have proper training in the safe and responsible use of firearms, that it places the youth in the care of trained and caring adults. It provides an opportunity for quality family involvement. It provides positive peer groups for the youth. It teaches the youth to respect the potential harm that can be caused from the improper use of firearms and archery equipment. And it emphasizes the respect for other people. And I think this is really the key, and this is probably the thing that I talk about the most is, we're teaching young people to respect firearms. They know what firearms can do, and they lose their curiosity about them. The goal of our program is not to claim Olympic gold medals, but to create gold medal kids. 4-H helps our young people shine. And, we want to make sure that everybody understands that goal. Sorry. Okay, there we go. So are there any questions at this point before we move on to the minimum standards? Ooh, I like that shirt too. Sorry. I'm always looking for new shirt ideas. Okay. So the minimum standards of the 4-H shooting sports program. There are 11 minimum standards, and these have been developed by the National Shooting Sports Committee, and the National 4-H headquarters supports them, as well as the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension. So of those, the National 4-H shooting sports curriculum is the established adult teaching curriculum for training adults to teach youth within the program. So, it's important that is the curriculum that you must use. All instructors accept and abide by the 4-H Shooting Sports Code of Ethics, and you will have a copy of, next slide, sorry. I was wrong. Here is what that looks like if you have never seen it. I will respect all people and property, set a good example as a mentor and role model, conduct myself and the program in a professional and ethical manner, learn and implement the positive youth development principles that guide the program, continue to expand my competencies in the subject matter I teach, and will adhere to the National 4-H Shooting Sports Curriculum, national minimum standards of safety, and state-level best practices. These are the things that we ask you as you are teaching, keep in mind when you're thinking, or when you wear your 4-H shooting sports instructor hat. Okay, so going on to some of the other minimum standards, the state, county, and club level 4-H shooting sports programs will have a written risk management plan that will include items such as emergency response and preparedness, insurance, safe storage of firearms and ammunition. If you're not aware, this risk management form is actually located on the state 4-H website. If you go to the shooting sports, you will find the document that you need to complete and send to your county level 4-H personnel, and then they will then send that on to the state level. Any certified 4-H shooting sports instructors are a minimum of 21 years of age and have completed a state level 4-H shooting sports workshop in the specific discipline that they will be teaching. Now, what that means is you can have younger individuals be shooting sports instructors. They just cannot be in charge of a live fire range. So there must be a shooting sports instructor that is at least 21 years of age that is in charge of that live fire range. You can never leave anyone under that age in charge. State shooting sports instructor certification workshops must provide a minimum of 12 hours of instruction. That includes a minimum of 9 hours in a specific discipline and a minimum of 3 hours of instruction for in teaching the positive youth development, life skills, and risk management. It's preferable and recommended that the state level workshops be 15 hours, but they are recognizing that that doesn't always happen. So it's important, you know, the 12 hours is the minimum. You must, to maintain certification at a level 1 or level 2, you must teach or assist in instruction within the discipline certified at least once every 3 years. So you must, so you need to go through, you know, you need to help at the county level, or if you're a state level instructor, then you have to teach every 3 years. You can only use factory ammunition at 4-H shooting sports competitive events. You cannot use your personal reloaded, and it's not recommended that you use reloaded ammunition at any 4-H shooting sports event, but at competition it is definitely not allowed. In regards to simulated combat sports, such including but not limited to paintball guns, airsoft guns, air pistols, and archery tag, this is not allowed. You can also not use any humanoid shaped, you cannot use any person or humanoid shaped target. So that would include like, you can use zombie pigs or zombie rats, but you cannot use a picture of a human zombie. That's a humanoid. Reactive targets, targets that make use of or are composed of live ammunition, explosive or flammable or chemical substances, or pressurized containers should never be used in 4-H activities. So you can use, you know, like targets that flip over, you know, flip down when you hit them, or if you have balloons or that type of thing, but you cannot use anything that uses live ammunition. And I don't know if I'm going to get time to talk about it tonight, but there is, you'll get a story of a young person that had a reactive target that went bad, and they were using shotgun shells as reactive targets because they make loud booms, and it did not go well. Nobody died, but there was injuries. Cloverbud aged youth are not allowed to participate in any live fire activity involving any of our disciplines, and all shooting sports functions must include the handling or use of firearms or archery equipment, requires a physical presence and constant supervision of at least one adult 4-H shooting sports instructor who is currently certified in that respective discipline. So what that means is if you are teaching rifle, you need to be certified in rifle. If you are teaching archery, you need to be certified in archery. If you are in charge of if you've got somebody that's gone through training, maybe, if they just need to jump in and maybe reposition somebody, but they cannot in any way be in charge. Okay, questions on that? If you guys have any questions that come up, please feel free to ask either myself or your instructor on Saturday and Sunday, because that's what we're here for. I'll be there during the training as well. So the thing about the minimum standards is there's no doubting these minimum standards, and there's no wavering on these minimum standards. If you deliberately disregard one of these, just like if you disregard one of the commandments, you will, somebody's going to get hurt, and worse yet, somebody could die. And if that's the case, your fate is going to rest in the hands of the judge and jury. And, if you disregard those recommendations of the national management body, such as the National Shooting Sports Committee or the university, then you are, the university, there's a good chance that you're not going to be represented and provide you any risk protection. So, but if you work within your scope, of your training and you follow those national minimum standards, you're okay. You know, you're going to do your best to avoid negligence, and then you're going to be okay. Okay, so state level best practices. You know, I've got these in a handout that I'm going to be sharing with you on Saturday. And I'm not going to go over these a lot. I just think it's important to know some of them. You know, make sure that we have in general, we have to wear eye protection. And it is recommended that we wear eye protection for archery. That includes spectators and coaches as well that are near the firing line. We need to wear ear protection when you are, when it's a live fire, and then footwear, short open-toed shoes of any kind are not recommended. So equipment, one of the things I want to let you guys know about equipment inventory, this is new to Nevada this year, is if your club or your county has shooting sports equipment, you will be audited on that equipment at least once. If you have not already been visited by somebody from from Cooperative Extension, then you will be visited, and they have to physically go through your equipment, and you need to have your inventory list. And they're going to be going through that. We only need to do that once right now, and then they will, in turn, every year you will be required to submit an updated membership or an updated inventory list. That's part of the risk management plan. But I just want everybody to be aware of it. And the other piece I want everybody to be aware of with equipment, if you wrote a grant to to the Friends of the NRA or any of the grants that you have written in the name of 4-H, that equipment belongs to 4-H. It does not belong to you personally. Even if you wrote the grant, if it was to benefit the 4-H program, then that equipment does belong to 4-H. And if you decide not to be a leader anymore and your club disbands, then that equipment needs to be returned back to the university. Probably to the county 4-H program is usually how it goes. Extension staff need to have access to equipment and all of your records. I mean, obviously they don't have to keep it at their office, but they need to be able to know how to get it. Equipment storage. This is, there's more information on here. If it's being stored at the local extension office, there are procedures in place. If you are storing it at your home, then we want you to follow as many of these as we can, but knowing that there are some issues. And so what you can do is contact your county, and then they'll probably contact me, and we'll work with you in that process. Ammunition should be stored separately from the guns that you use. That also includes archery. You really should, if you can, store it in a closet or a room that has at least 2 locks on the door. Now, granted, I know that's, again, we'll work with you on some of those things. Transportation, you need to make sure that you are following local, state, and federal laws. Only licensed drivers over the age, really it should be over the age of 21, because it should really only be, I think, and I've got to look, I'm going to look really quick, because in Nevada, that's one where we had a little bit different, we had a different rule. Oh no, it is licensed individuals 18 and older are allowed to transport shooting sports equipment. You must transport firearms in locked cases, and they must be, where they're not visible. Adult participation. Instructors have the right to refuse someone for participation for safety reasons. They should try to provide, we should try to provide accommodations for those with disabilities. It can be done. What you need to do is just work through it with your county, or work through it with your, I'll work through it with you. Okay, and then the other things I've already talked about on that. Any questions on that? I know I'm zipping through these, and you'll have more time to read these. Okay, so risk management. Yes, is there a question? Nope, okay. On risk management, so this is kind of the model. So if you simply look at, if you look at it very simply, it's a chance of loss. So what are risks for youth and adults who are involved in the shooting sports program?
Injury.
Injury, yep. Injury is a big one. Or even worse, a fatal injury. Yep. If we're on the wrong end of a civil lawsuit, where there's a claim of negligence, that's not a good thing. We look at, that's probably the biggest, those are the biggest ones. Our reputation. So again, we need to keep it simple. So essentially what we're doing with the risk management stuff is, we are protecting our assets by minimizing the potential for negative outcomes. So if you're going to describe the word assets, how would you describe that other than being 6 points in the game of Scrabble? So it could be our tangible assets. It could be, these are our tangible things, our current, so cash, stock, etc. And I will tell you, most people, it sounds really bad, but most people think, oh, I've got it. I'm going to sue the university and now we're good. We're golden. They have lots of flush cash and they're going to pay. So, and believe me, the university does not like to pay. But then we also have, and you need to think about that as a, as a shooting sports instructor. I don't want to scare anybody, but, we need to think about, make sure we're following the proper procedures. And then fixed, our land and our facilities. And then intangible are things like reputation and people. So ways that we can, and I'm gonna skip through this and I'm gonna let you read that. I hope that a lot of you are familiar with risk management. We can identify the risk, we analyze the risk, we evaluate the risk, and decide, is it worth it or not? And then the treatment for that is retain, reduce, or share, or avoid. So essentially, okay, we're going to identify, you can see those risks that we're taking. We're going to analyze, is it a high risk or a low risk? And so, this one's looking at, is there a risk of lava flow appearing in your backyard? If you live in Texas, probably not that high. If you live in Hawaii, probably pretty high. And then you're going to look at the evaluation. Is it a low severity, low frequency, or high severity, high frequency? And then, you can see the examples. And then you're going to look at, are you going to retain that risk? Okay, it's worth it. Or are you going to reduce it by making changes? Or are you going to share that risk? And that would be like bus companies, a lot of times you're going to share that risk. And then avoid. That could be, you just decide it's too much and you don't, it's too much for you to deal with and you're not going to do the activity. Okay. And then what does that mean? So essentially you have a duty to provide a safe place for the program. You're going to conduct activities in a reasonable and prudent manner in accordance with recognized protocol and procedures. You are going to, negligence essentially means if you have failure to perform a legally owned duty in a reasonably and prudent person would perform, then the failure resulting in the consequence, that's where you would run into trouble. So proving negligence, duty owned, duty breached, actual damages, or proximal cause. So proving negligence, again, you have to look at it. Is a reasonable and prudent person going to make that same decision? If that's the case, very reasonable, then then you're okay. So your number one duty is to follow the established 4-H shooting sports manual of instruction and the lesson plans and those safety procedures that are provided. You're going to properly plan the activity, the instruction, explain the risks to the young person, monitor for injury, and provide the adequate safety equipment. Now, this stuff, and your instructors on Saturday will go over these things. That's why I'm kind of going through these quickly. You're going to provide proper emergency response. The thing is you need to always designate somebody that can call 911, because in an emergency, you may forget to do that. And so that's one way that you could do it. Maintain adequate records, provide close supervision, and you should always inspect the equipment, inspect the facilities, inspect the weather, and inspect the people that are in charge. So you need to write it all down. And what's that called? Your risk management plan. So, like I said, you do have to create that risk management plan. So you've carefully thought about all the angles. You've done this 1,000 times. It comes naturally to you. You know what you're doing. It's what you've been trained to do your whole life. So you think nothing can go wrong, right? You need to think again. So I love that I love that analogy. So, and then the next one, I am not going to go into, this is where, it's a bad day when at your county shoot, you have a 7-year-old Cloverbud member who receives 53 pieces of lead shot in the shoulder, neck, and face at close range, or 1 to 2 feet. This is the accident that I was telling you about. So the match was over, and they were cleaning up. So, the 7-year-old can participate. The guns were all stored. They were all put away. There weren't any guns around. What happened, there was a reactive target that utilized that shotgun shell, was downrange, and it hadn't discharged, and nobody paid attention. So, how bad was it when it happened? That, Cody could have been, the young person could have been fatally injured, permanently disfigured, or suffered long-term injuries. The county 4-H shooting sports, the 4-H shooting sports program in that county, it was automatically shut down by the LGU pending the investigation. And the entire state program was in danger of being shut down. The LGU, the university, wanted to shut down the entire 4-H program, the shooting sports program at that point. So how did it keep, how do you keep that thing from happening? You need to think about all of those bad things that can happen and engineer those bad things out. That's why we no longer have reactive targets like that. So good things good things from the risk management front. So first of all, the 7-year-old that was injured, his mom was a range safety officer, and she's a good mom and a good shooting sports instructor. So, it could have been Johnny's friend from down the street that you don't know and isn't involved in your program. He was just there. There are new national standards regarding reactive targets. There are new national standards regarding Cloverbud involvement. And this was Cody 4 days later. He was taking it easy at home, but he was not injured badly. He was injured, but not life-threatening. And that was very, very fortunate, the program. And this happened in one of the strongest 4-H programs 4-H shooting sports programs in the country. So it's really important, and they, it's just it was one of those things, but there are, we have to think about those. So risk management is real, and it's really, really important for us to think about. It really should be the number one thing that we think about. And, as I go through these modules, every time I think I should start with the risk management and end with, the other stuff, because it feels like I'm always rushing through this through this module. And it is the most important. So are there any questions? I know we rushed through that tonight. And it's 9:03. I'm only 3 minutes late getting finished. So like I said, you're all going to get this information, and it's written in a couple of different formats. I'm actually going to share with you. I've saved it. Let me find it really quick. I'm going to just quickly share with you the document that you're going to get on Saturday along with the PowerPoints. But this is the document that you're going to get on Saturday. So it is, go through here. So this is module 1, so what is 4-H? So it goes right along with the PowerPoints, and it has all of the information that I discussed tonight in there written out for you. So that's why, you know, I was like, well, you're going to have it. And so you'll be able to look at this more in depth. And if you have questions, so I just wanted to, yeah, so that's what it's going to look like. And it has it for all 4 of the modules. So as questions come up, please, please, please feel free to ask me. That's what I'm here for. And ask your county person. You know, we've got outstanding county people. So, and thank you everybody for hanging with me today. I really appreciate your willingness to stick out 3 hours of this training. I know it's tough on a Monday night, but I will see everybody on Saturday. We will begin at 8 a.m. at the range. The address is on the registration form, and Karen from Fallon said that she will have signs along the road, you know, at the major places that you need to know how to get there. So, and if anybody, I'm going to type in the chat box, if you can see the chat box. If anybody has any anybody has any problems that day, you know, getting out there, feel free. This is my cell phone. Feel free to either call or text me. Hopefully there's cell phone service, and I will help you or find somebody that can help you.
Can you publish the 6 incidents that have happened in the program in the past?
You know, the only ones I know about, the one that I just shared with you. The other one I know was a young person that was carrying he had his gun barrel pointed down, resting on his toe as he was walking, and shot his toe off. And, you know, I don't know what the others are. I'm sure somebody does, but I've never asked.
They're not actually published somewhere where, you know, we could use them as a training tool later on for other groups.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to make a note, and I will ask my friends on the shooting sports. So, oh, thank you, Heather. So I do have AT&T, so my cell phone may not work, but I'll try. So. Somebody will know what those 4 accidents are, or those 6 accidents are. So, thank you, everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you, Carrie. We really appreciate you doing this for us.
Oh, not a problem. So I will see you guys on Saturday.
All right. See you there.
Thanks.